Is Sony ripping you off? Leading into this console generation, the most exciting thing for me was seeing how absolutely different Xbox and PlayStation strategies were going to be for their games going forward. With the last generation, despite the fact that Xbox announced a completely different console, by the time it actually came out, the difference between the Xbox One and the PS4 really wasn't that noticeable, other than the fact that the Xbox One ran games at 900p and the PS4 ran them at 1080p. Now for me, that was kind of a big deal because I'm the person who favors frame rate and resolution mainly over fidelity, with like having the most insane textures or weird particle effects and crazy graphic effects going on. I just want the game to look good at a certain resolution and run really well, and Sony gave me that much more than Microsoft did. It really started in the PS3 generation when Sony realized they were already at a disadvantage because their console cost $600 and it didn't have a lot of games at launch because it was so hard to develop for, so they came up with this strategy of just making a ton of high-profile blockbuster style third-person action games. And in the PS4 generation, that is where they really hit their stride. Every year we would get at least 2 banger games from Sony, like Uncharted 4, the Ratchet & Clank remake, The Last of Us Remastered, The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima. I could just keep going on all day about all the awesome games we had on that console. And Xbox, on the other hand, didn't really have anything in terms of exclusives. I know people were really hoping that every time a new game would come out, it would be this Sony rivaling masterpiece, but as we got stuff like Gears 4 and especially Halo 5, it felt like Microsoft was losing its touch. Now, of course, we all know they focused heavily on the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility, and then they extended it to the original Xbox, and by the end of the generation, they got it to the point where they could patch old games like Halo 3 and make them run at 4K on the Xbox One X, which was really cool, but it wasn't really enough because people just want to play new games at the end of the day. And that's where Game Pass was introduced, which we all know now is basically the Netflix of games. It started small, but it's gotten huge over the years, and now it's on PC. It comes with cloud streaming. It has Xbox Live bundled in if you go for Game Pass Ultimate or whatever it's called. But the point is, it's become an incredible service with a ton of awesome games. So when you look at where Microsoft is at now and you look at where Sony is now, Sony is still sticking with that strategy they came up with 2 generations ago, and they're just continuing to refine it, where they put out banger games that have tons of hours of content, great cutscenes, great characters, great writing, awesome gameplay, like everything is firing on all cylinders. But at the end of the day, pretty much all they're making is third-person action games. And then you look at the Microsoft side, and they have a ton of games coming out all the time. But the one thing that's really changed for Microsoft is that they spent pretty much the entire end of the last generation going out and buying tons and tons of studios. And people thought, oh, Microsoft's just buying these studios because they can't make good games themselves. And to that, I say it doesn't really matter. If Microsoft's got good exclusive games, Microsoft's got good exclusive games. And they were smart about buying studios who put out games that were not really AAA in their quality, but they had AAA potential. And Microsoft saw that, gave them money, and now all of that stuff is starting to come out. This Xbox E3 showcase was absolutely insane. Every single game made me say, oh, I would try that out. And knowing in the back of my head that I can just download them for free on day one because I have Game Pass, I can really do that. I remember back when I would watch E3 and something like that would happen where 20 or 30 games were announced that I really wanted to play, and I'd have to be like, well, I'm just gonna have to end up picking 3 or 4 of those to buy new, and then I'll have to wait for like Black Friday or a summer sale or something like that to try out all the other games when they get a lot cheaper, because I'm not made of money over here, guys. Obviously, this was exemplified by the fact that Sony wasn't even at E3, and I think their biggest announcement from the entire show was that Death Stranding director's cut, which to be fair was cool. I really like Death Stranding, but seeing stuff like Stalker 2, Redfall, Halo Infinite's awesome campaign story trailer that made it seem like Halo 1 and introduce a new type of Cortana, like that was just so cool. Oh, and the big deep dive on the multiplayer the next day. There was stuff to talk about from Xbox for the first time in years, and all of their big bets from the last generation finally seem like they're going to pay off. Now, of course, all of these games could come out and they could suck, and they could be full of microtransactions and other free-to-play things that are being used to make up for the fact that they had to sink a ton of money into these just to give them away for free on Game Pass, but we don't know if that's going to happen, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen, which is important. And when you look at Sony, the future is definitely not so certain. Their 2 biggest games that we have coming down the pipe, which are Horizon Forbidden West and God of War 2, those are both coming to PS4, and that's not really that exciting for someone who just shelled out $500 for a console. And I'll talk about this in a different video, but I've had nothing but problems with their native PS5 games in the first place, so I don't know, I'm just not really thrilled with the future of Sony, and I am thrilled with the future of Microsoft, which is very scary as someone who has a PlayStation channel. The thing that really got me thinking about how important Game Pass is going to be is an article from Paul Tassi, who's one of my favorite writers in the gaming industry. He was talking about how the value of Game Pass compares to the value of what Sony is doing and how it really shakes out in raw numbers. And before you say it, I know you can be like, well, Sony's output is just such of a higher caliber than what Microsoft is doing, and I don't really care about that. It's going to get to a point where if the value is good enough, and I have a bunch of games that are maybe like AAA at the very bottom level, whereas Sony is in the mid grade of AAA, I'm gonna go with the Xbox side of things, because at the end of the day, I'll just have more to play over there, you know? So anyway, the way he broke it down is by saying, hypothetically, over the next 3 years, let's say that Sony and Microsoft each put out 12 games that are must plays. If you look at what Sony is putting out and you take $70 times 12 games, yeah. So if you take those 12 games, which are theoretically going to be released over 3 years, and you say they cost $70 each, you're gonna end up paying $840 for those 12 games, which that's a lot of money, especially considering how much PS5s can cost people right now on the scalping market. Like, you're gonna pay the cost of a PS5 to play those 12 games on the scalping market over the next 3 years. On the Microsoft side, you're taking Game Pass, which costs $10, and you're doing that math, and you end up with $360. That is an insanely different number that can actually matter. Like, honestly, if you get Game Pass and you play those 12 games for $360, that's gonna leave you with enough money left over to really pick and choose the Sony games you wanna play on your PS5. And that is nuts. Like, you almost have enough money on the other end to go buy a PS5. If this was the Xbox One generation we were talking about, I would just sit here and be like, yeah, it doesn't matter because Xbox has no games. But right now, they have a lot of games. I know Halo Infinite looked rough when they showed it off last year. The campaign was not doing anything for me at that time. I like that they changed the art style to make it look like the original Halo, but it looked a little too much like the original Halo in the sense that it looked like an original Xbox game. This new look we got at it last weekend made it look like a full-on brand new Halo game that was taking the design elements from the first game and modernizing them in the way that it should have. And then the deep dive on the multiplayer the next day, oh my god, that got me so hyped. I want every game to take their idea for battle passes. Like, instead of having a battle pass that costs $10 and lasts 3 months, and if you don't finish it, all of that stuff you didn't earn just goes away, or you can pay to finish out the pass, which sucks because if you only make it to like tier 40 out of 100, you're probably gonna end up paying the price of a full game to get all of that content you miss. Instead of that, what they're doing is saying, yeah, every time we add a battle pass into the game, you can just take as long as you want to complete it, and you can move on to the next one if you want when a new one comes out, or you can just stick with the one you're currently doing. We just want you to be able to have challenges to do to unlock this content so your hobby doesn't turn into a chore. And I love that. And then we got to talk about Starfield, which was announced to be an Xbox and PC exclusive last weekend. Now that that's the case, everyone's being like, oh, Bethesda hasn't made a great game in years. Did you play Fallout 76? But at the end of the day, you can feel that those people know they're going to be missing out on an incredible game. Like, I don't like getting super hyped and assuming a game's going to be incredible because we all know what happened with Cyberpunk. But at the end of the day, Bethesda's got a near perfect track record from their main studio. Fallout 76 was not made at Bethesda Studios, Maryland. It was made in Austin, and they put the Bethesda Studios name on it. So when you look at the history of what Bethesda Game Studios has put out, it's pretty damn good, and they've upgraded their engine so much that it's being called the Creation Engine 2. I think this game's gonna be as big of a deal as Skyrim was when it came out on 11/11/11, and clearly Bethesda does too, because they're releasing this one on 11/11/2022. And I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that Xbox isn't doing the same thing as Sony and releasing games like Halo Infinite on Xbox One as well, but they said from the beginning that's what they were going to be doing, whereas Jim Ryan over at Sony put out his stuff that said, oh, we believe in generations, we're gonna ditch the PS4 when the PS5 comes out and make exclusive games for that. And that's really coming back to bite him in the ass right now. And then when you look at what the Xbox is doing, they have a solution for games like Starfield that cannot run on the Xbox One. They're saying, oh, if you just pay for Game Pass, you'll be able to play it through xCloud streaming and it'll work just fine. You can play it on your phone, your iPad, your Xbox One, or your PC that can't run it, and everything's just gonna work. Now, of course, I don't love streaming, but it's not the main thing they're using. It's like a supplementary feature you get with this service that already comes with thousands of games and tons of great features. So if Game Pass came out and started making Microsoft's games worse, I would be saying I'm glad that Sony hasn't figured out some sort of competitor, but by all accounts, it's just made pretty much every Microsoft game better, and that's what's making me say Sony's strategy of just putting out $70 $70 games that are really, really good is not going to work in the long run. And I think people are eventually going to get sick of open world, third person, action, post-apocalyptic games. Like, Sony is relying way too heavily on that stuff right now. And I really hope they've got some stuff in the works, like multiplayer shooters, first person type stuff, you know, different things than what they've been making before that can really get people excited again. And also, they got to have some competitor to Game Pass, or they're just going to have to put Game Pass on the PS5. And I know they don't want to do that. But yeah, that's all the spicy takes I've got for you on the PS5 today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. And remember, if you want to stay PS ready, subscribe and set your notifications to all. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.